Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of American Gods, as well as the latest episode of Twin Peaks. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of American Gods, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Twin Peaks. But the first thing we're going to talk about is American Gods, a very good episode this week, a very interesting episode too, because obviously we delve deeper this week on apparently there's a big connection between Laura and Mads. I mean, for one, not even just where they are right now, but even their past connections, which it does bring up the things that kind of pop up in my head immediately is, does Mads realize that Laura is connected to Essie McGowan or not? That's one of her, that was her ancestor or whatever. I wonder, did he know that? Because I don't think throughout the entire, story, he never actually physically saw Essie until she was an old lady. Obviously, when they were cellmates and stuff, I mean, not necessarily cellmates, but, in a somewhat of a sense of a way, cellmates, they never actually met face to face. And anytime he was giving a blessing and picking up stuff that she left, did he ever meet her then? That's what I'm curious about. I mean, because we also found out, this is also where that, I guess, the main gold coin comes from. It came from Essie herself, the one that's inside of Laura. So is that why it's so special to him? Because, for him, it's in a time where magic is kind of lost, people don't follow traditions because, Essie grew up on the tales of the fairy folk and leprechauns, which is kind of interesting learning about the leprechauns. It's almost like the way, Essie's, granny was talking about is yeah, screw leprechauns. Those guys are kind of assholes. All they care about is they don't have time. The fairy folk, they kind of let out beautiful music and everything. It's not leprechauns. They're too busy dealing with their gold. So, that's all they really focus on is guarding their gold. So I guess that's kind of why Mads is so persistent about getting his gold back, because I guess for him it's all the other coins are meaningless. So I don't know whether it's just a leprechaun thing of needing that coin back, especially because it's, I guess maybe it's a situation where leprechauns can put all their magic and all their luck and everything tied to one specific object, and maybe maybe Essie made such an impact on him because all throughout all her life, I mean, granted there were points where she kind of let it slip, because it's one of those situations where it's you spent so much of your life praying and following the old teachings of being leaving stuff out, leaving out, whatever you have for the fairy folk, she kept that tradition alive. Yes, she forgot at one point in time, but still, she kept it up most of her life. And I think that's what made him kind of like her so much. Even when she came time for her to be in the new world, she still kept those traditions on and she passed them on. Granted, there was a point, obviously, when she got older, it was no longer viable because, the kids weren't fascinated by the old tales. They scared them too much. So it's yeah, I guess it's time to kind of retire that. I'll keep the tales alive in me. And I think that's what Mads appreciated about her. And the fact is that she kept up the blessing, that she taught other people to keep up the blessings as well. But not just for her, but everyone else too. So maybe she made an impact on him to why that coin is so important. But, I mean, I feel so bad for Essie because her life wasn't always the easiest thing. It's a situation, especially that Bartholomew dude. Fuck Bartholomew, lying like that. It's oh yeah, her mom asked, oh, did you actually give her this? It's no, I didn't. It's what? What are all those sweet talking you were talking about? You were going to marry her and everything. You piece of shit. I mean, dude. And she was literally going on trial for it because it's and the way the dude who writes this stuff, the dude that's connected to Anubis, which is kind of interesting hearing that from Anubis being oh yeah, you've got a story to tell. It's I can tell because I'm looking at your fingers. It's him telling stories. I mean, obviously it seems that's his thing. He's the god of stories and kind of recording all of time in history and stuff like that. He knows all events and everything because he started all this with the thought of oh yeah, the coming to the new world and stuff like that. But then it's oh, whoa, wait a minute. And then he heard something there was a moment that kind of flashed in his head that showed Mads, and he said the name Essie, and it was oh, this reminds me of Essie. So it seems it's not necessarily 100% a thing he can always control. It's just I guess Anubis kind of saw the feeling, the look in his hands, oh, you're ready to tell a story, that's something inside you, maybe it's a situation where he has no real control of it, the stories come to him and he needs to get them out type of thing. Maybe it's kind of the feeling of when you kind of wake up and you stretch that relieved feeling. Maybe that's what he gets when he writes. But nevertheless, that just sucked for Essie. And then it's obviously, I've never heard about that transportation aspect of the whole situation of basically if like lowlives have that as an option. It's not just like either you sit here and you're most likely going to go to the gallows or whatever, or you can be on transportation. Like initially, Essie was up there for like 7 years, and it's like holy crap. And then eventually later on, obviously we know she ended up getting a life sentence at one point. But it's like, I mean, that was not the time to be caught being a thief. Like, you should always like, it's just kind of a note to think of as like things are kind of, that was a very different time when you actually look at it. It's like, man, things were harsh for a lot of stuff. Like stuff that would be a big deal, but not like a big deal. Like your life is over big deal. It was like just from stealing something. Which for her, she was like, screw it. Everyone calls me a thief. I was already accused of being a thief. Why not just be what they claim me to be? She even got married to the captain who brought her back and everything. And that's where she started her thieving. And she got very good at it. But once again, she kind of forgot to start, her good luck kind of faded away when she kind of started losing her touch with the old ways of leaving out stuff. So, but it was also interesting. The fact is that she and Mads obviously met in prison, like I was bringing up earlier, which is why I'm like, they never actually met face to face, but maybe on some level he always knew. Maybe he knew maybe that's why he looks at Laura. Maybe that's kind of why he has such a problem with Laura, is because it's like, I don't like you, Laura, but I know where you come from. You come from good people. Maybe that's it, or maybe it's not. Maybe, like I said, maybe it doesn't work like that. For the blessings, maybe he doesn't have to actually know. He's like, okay, I'm aware of who it comes from. I don't know what they look like. I don't really know them that well, but here I'm passing on my blessings. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe he doesn't actually need to know. I mean, he knows her name, but maybe he doesn't recognize her face or something like that. I'm curious to know, is that what he sees when he sees Laura? He sees Essie. But Essie led a very interesting life, and it seems like you can obviously see some correlations there between the kind of fact of like, this is just how things are. Like, I mean, as we saw, she had kittens at one point in time, so it's like, I guess that's something that, Laura kind of inherited from her. But it's just like, it's kind of interesting because like, Essie was so intent on the old ways, like believing, passing down those tales and everything. But obviously when you get to Laura, it's like, Laura's like, nah, screw that. Like, I don't pray. I don't, it's like, there's nothing afterlife, blah, blah, blah. It's like, she didn't really believe anything, which is kind of interesting. But then again, like I brought up earlier, Essie stopped telling those tales because she felt like there was no more room for them. I mean, her kids enjoy them, when she got the chance. I mean, it's actually kind of interesting because it's like, I guess you can see a little bit of Essie in her, because you could argue Essie's kind of a con artist, because it's like, oh, when she met John Richardson, what did she do? She's like, oh, he tried to make moves on. She's like, oh, I can't believe you do this. I'm your servant and everything. And the fact is, how messed up that is, that to tease a girl who's obviously got feelings for you and everything. It's like, wow, you have got a silver tongue on you. Like, holy crap. Wow, that is crazy that you were able to spin that lie like that, and that made him feel bad and everything. They got married, which they were actually happy. I mean, even though it was a lie and everything, it's not like like I said previously, she got married. She stole from him after he left and everything. So, but in a way, she actually was happy. They were married for 10 years until, he died from fever. So, but then again, the point I'm bringing up is like, how Laura and Shadow met. They met under very interesting circumstances. Like, hey, let's rob this place blind. We have still yet to get to, but I mean, the thing is, I'm gonna get to tie it together. Is like, obviously in this episode we learned like Mads was there when Laura died. It was actually him. Like, maybe he made it so that like he messed with their luck being a leprechaun and everything, or maybe he drove in that direction at that right time to cause the accident. Whatever the case may be, he was directly correlated to it, because he's even like, he's talking to the crow. He's like, fine, tell him it's done. So going back to what I brought up last episode, Mr. Wednesday blatantly obviously wants Laura out of the way. Like, that was pretty apparent last episode, even more so this episode, because it's like he wanted her dead, because from the very beginning he's had his eyes on Shadow, and she was a distraction. Like, the moment they crossed paths, that was a point where Mr. Wednesday was like, no, this can't be done. It makes you wonder, at what point did he latch on to Shadow? Like, what is so special about Shadow that he wants him? That's what I'm trying to understand. Like, I guess, like I said, I get the feeling like Shadow, like, from the very beginning, I've said it, I don't know what Shadow is. It seems like he's a human, but now it's seeming like, oh, he's got powers. Whatever the case may be, he's something special in Mr. Wednesday's big plan, whatever it is. Obviously, this war is his plan and everything. But is Shadow a god in the making? Like, does he have the potential to rise to become a god? Or has he always been a god? He's just never realized it. Maybe it's a situation where he lost his man. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning more to the fact that, like, Mr. Wednesday is setting him up to be a god. That's like, hey, you become my god. And the fact of the matter is, like, I like, you have the potential to be a god, and it's like, I'm bringing out that potential in you because I want you on my side, for this war and everything. Like from the very beginning, it's like, I mean, like I've said previously, all Shadow is for him is a weapon, a means to an end for what, his goal of like basically taking out the new gods and stuff like that. But now that kind of like, as I brought it up before, I think that's the reason why Shadow got caught in the first place was because of Mr. Wednesday. Mr. Wednesday probably set it all in motion. Hell, for all we know, because Mads is kind of his errand boy, as Laura kind of puts it. So it's like, maybe that's what this is all about. Like, Mads was there when the plan went wrong and got Shadow put in jail. That was to keep him separated from Laura, because it was to kind of put things in motion so that there'd be a rift between them, and even up killing her just for the sake of getting her out of the picture. But she inadvertently came back to life and now was screwing with his plans. That's why he's trying to keep Shadow as far away from her. It's like, oh yeah, you shouldn't forgive her. Oh yeah, basically like, yo, let's just leave. Who cares about her? Why he's trying to keep them separated so much? Just fascinating, and it blows my mind. So, I mean, who's to say like how much of this, like I said from the very beginning, it's like Matt was like, yo, he's a manipulator. You're making a deal with the devil. It's like from the very beginning, you're kind of like, okay, Mr. Wednesday seems like an okay guy. Yes, he's got his ulterior motives and everything, but now it's like, nah, man, he's got ulterior motives. Like, you have to emphasize that so much more now, because it's like, what are you getting out of all that? I mean, well, even then, we still don't 100% know what the hell he's getting on this. I've always interpreted it as like he wants to ensure his position, because if he like whatever it is he's planning, he's trying to get everyone rallied behind him under these like, trying to fancy it up and like, oh yeah, I'm doing this for you, because obviously Vulcan last episode was like, yeah, I'm not buying that. I know it's like, oh, you're doing it for the right reasons, but it's like, no, you're doing it for your own reasons. We're all just pawns in your game and everything. So I think it's all about ensuring his own position, that if he wins this, he can rise to the top and no one will ever like challenge him again, Like, I get the feeling there might be a situation that he actually lost some of his power and now he's trying to gain it back for whatever reason. Maybe that's what Shadow's for. Give Shadow some powers so that he can steal them from Shadow and make them his own. So either way, it still plays into the role of like, oh, Shadow's nothing more to a weapon than him. So that was kind of interesting. I mean, especially kind of plays out more like, but now that, Mads actually felt bad about it. Once again, I don't know whether it's just because he felt bad about doing that to some lady that he really didn't know, but I think it might also because of the Essie connection. So then I'm like, so does he know that? I'm getting the feeling he does know. He hasn't said anything, but I think he does know, because I think, for him, he's putting keeping a lot of that to the, like, very close to his heart. So it's like, what did Essie mean to you for you to be going through this? I mean, once again, it's like she kept up the traditions and everything. She's one of the few people, especially like coming here. It was a new start, a new beginning, but it's a place with no magic and everything. But it's like people like her kept it up. So because of that, because he is indebted to her, maybe he actually cares about Laura. It's like, he never really paid too much attention to her family, but now that it's come full circle and he's crossed paths with her, it's like, I owe your great so on and so forth grandmother, I owe her for, her keeping up the old ways of lives and everything for someone like me. So that's what, why he saved Laura. I got the feeling like the moment he's kind of getting out of the ice cream truck, which I appreciate that scene and everything. I'm like, oh yeah, ice cream truck, because she needs to keep it super cold. And she's like, stop being a bitch. So he's like, well, we're not all like, slabs of like cold dead meat like you are. So I don't know, that was just kind of an interesting thing, because obviously they hate each other so much, but then it like, it adds a little different, like, it makes you go like, it seems like Mads is conflicted because he doesn't like Laura, but once again, it's like the whole, like, Essie situation kind of makes him go, okay, I have to stick around you, like, make sure you're okay, like, during all this. I mean, once again, we kind of got a little peek at Mads' past, finding out that basically he was once a king. But then, I like how he broke it down, but he was like, yeah, but then I got turned into a bird, and then, like, the saints, then the church came, and they made us into saints and trolls and blah, blah, blah. And then General Mills kind of had their way with us, and it's like, bam, that was a done deal, so. But for him, what this is all about, what he wants, what Mr. Wednesday is giving him, what he wants out of all of this is a place to die, because he wants to die on the battlefield, because he was supposed to die a very long time ago, but he ran away from the war because he saw his own death and it scared him. And now I guess, like, after everything that's happened, probably maybe things that he's lost along the way, people he's lost along the way, he's just given up and he's just like, no, like, it's time for me to have died like I was supposed to. I mean, Laura's is kind of like, oh yeah, dying's okay. I mean, present company, like, saying like, hey, yeah, you should try dying. And obviously you've been around for a long time. So it does also seem like, to the point, like, even, Laura's kind of getting in a position of believing like you really were like a leprechaun, you are a leprechaun and everything like that. What side note about Laura, I also appreciate the fact is that she lifted up that damn truck like that. That was pretty badass. And Max is just kind of like, huh. Even kind of like, it seems like she's warming up to him because at the end, like you see that look on her face. Obviously she's blowing the horn and like, hurry the hell up and everything. But you see like kind of like her demeanor kind of change towards him. I guess after hearing about his past and everything, him looking for a place to die. That's what he's doing. Like all like because I mean Mads has kind of put it out there. He's like, it wasn't just being Wednesday's errand boy. I've done other things too, like things that obviously he's not proud of it. Laura being one of those things. So whether he'll actually tell her or not, I don't know. Maybe he'll even end up telling Shadow. I'm very interested to see like how this all plays out. I mean, next week is the season finale, and it looks like everything's coming to a head. Like the gods are gathering, and there's like obviously Laura and Mads are making their way. Also, interestingly enough, I appreciate the fact that Laura told Sayum, like, hey, this is where your gin is. And then Mads was like, what the hell are you doing? But, and he's just kind of like, you are a terrible person, and just left. So hopefully he finds his gin. Also, we learned that about that buffalo, too. I forgot its name. I could check my notes. Well, I think it's Tatanka Sky. And that's what the white buffalo is. It's kind of sad too. It was born in 2008. It's just great. Everyone gathered around to kind of find this thing because it was born in 2008. I thought it would be kind of older than what it is, but nevertheless, that it as well as a dude that had it. I think his name was Derek. Both died the same that same day. A year later, a year after its birth, they both die. Lightning strike. So. Which didn't you hear lightning and you're like, Odin? I mean, Mr. Wednesday? Maybe, but for what purposes? I don't know. Because obviously Shadow keeps seeing that, like, it symbolized in his dream and it had red flaming eyes and stuff like that. So, like, what does that mean? I don't know. I'm very interested, like I said, very interested to see what goes down in the season finale and see how, like, all this concludes. I mean, it probably won't conclude, but it's like, still, like, everything is coming to a head, so. And now moving on to this week's episode of Twin Peaks, interesting episode, still continuing to be like, okay, what the hell is going on? What does this all mean in the long scheme of things of just multitude of things happen? Obviously, one of the biggest things of the episode is like, lo and behold, we find who it is that Albert was tracking down. And lo and behold, it is, in fact, Diane. Interesting enough, is that Juliette Lewis? I think that's her. I wasn't sure. I mean, we gotta look at her, but it's like, it looked like that might have been her. I think the white hair kind of threw me off, but I think that's her. I mean, I think it's so interesting because last episode I threw her name out there. I was like, yeah, because I think I mentioned it last episode too. Like, I completely forget that Diane's a character sometimes, even though like Cooper spent so much time, quote unquote, talking to her all throughout the entire series. He's always sending messages to her and stuff like that. Did he do that a lot in the like later parts of season 2? I don't think that, maybe that's why, because I kind of forget, because like I think there's a long period of time where he didn't talk to her in season 2, but maybe, I don't know, nevertheless. I mean, it is a question, like, I mean, it does make sense that she does know him, because that is the person that she's probably worked with the longest. Like, I mean, we don't really know how long Diane and Cooper have worked together. I mean, I do know that outside of Twin Peaks, I do know, like, outside of the shows, there are other canons. Like, I'm pretty sure there's, like, books and stuff like that. Whether stuff like that's been brought in, like, I don't know, like, to my knowledge, the only thing I know for sure canon are the TV shows. I mean, the TV show as well as the movie. But I do know there's novels that exist outside of it. Like, one of the novels, I think it's like Laura's Diary is kind of like what one of the novels is. So that's the only thing I'm aware of. I don't know whether there's multiple books. I get the feeling like there were, but nevertheless. It turns out it is in fact her, which this is cool, but at the same time it leaves the question a lot. Well, the fact is it is her. What does that mean for Annie and Audrey? Because we still don't know where the status of their characters are. I mean, especially like how Audrey's situation ended up and where Annie's situation ended up. So it's like, okay. I kind of get the feeling like if she, considering the fact is Annie is Norma's sister, I mean, maybe after everything that went down, she had to get away from Twin Peaks, but I feel like out of anywhere she would be in Twin Peaks because, that's Norma's sister and everything. So, and Audrey, we haven't seen her pop up. We've seen her dad pop up and, her Uncle Jerry, but that's about it, when it comes to the Horn family and everything. So, I mean, we'll just kind of have to wait and see, but nevertheless, other things we ended up finding out about, we found out that the dude that works at the sheriff's department, Chad, total douchebag. Holy crap. Like, the fact of the matter is, like, we find out, like, Doris kind of going on rants and stuff like that. Like, oh my god, my dad's car's not being fixed. It's like, maybe he left it in emergency. Like, you think my dad can't drive? You're supposed to get it fixed. Why are you always against me? I'm like, wow, she's a piece of work. But then you hear from one of the operator, and she's kind of like, she's talking to Chad, so like, you shouldn't, like, talk smack about her like that. The fact of the matter is, like, she wasn't always like that. She became like that because their son committed suicide. And he's like, oh, because he was like, oh, I couldn't handle being a soldier. When? It's like, what? Why do you have to be such a piece of shit, dude? Holy crap, you suck. Like, you can kind of tell he was an asshole before. It's just kind of like, oh, he's so dismissive of everything. It's like, oh, you're listening to the log lady. Oh, it's like, shut up. It's like Twin Peaks is a place where you, I mean, granted, I guess, like, unless you're, like, we don't know, like, the status of the Bookhouse Boys, but I think the Bookhouse Boys, especially, like, Hulk, we know Harry was more open to, especially after everything that went down, he's more open to the idea of, like, yo, there's some crazy crap out there. I mean, especially being Bookhouse Boy, but even more so because of everything that went down in the series. Hulk, being who Hulk is, like, you know, his background and everything, he's more open spiritually to everything out there in the universe, too, so it's kind of like, they're more inclined to it, which not by that question. We don't know what the status of the Bookhouse Boys are. Is Harry's brother part of that or not? I don't know. It's very curious. But nevertheless, Hulk ended up. I guess it was something Hulk was. It's like, oh, you'll find this because of your heritage or something like that. It's something only you'll find. Like, basically, he's in the bathroom. His dimes like a dime he has rolls, which I'm wondering, is that supposed to be correlation to what happened earlier in the episode with the whole dime thing, which I'll obviously get to that in a second. But then, like, he pries open the door, like part of the door frame for the stall doors, ends up finding a note there, because basically there was a little thing from the manufacturers of the door or whatever, and it had like a Native American symbol, I guess, as the company's logo or whatever. And it's like, oh, so was that what that's supposed to mean? What was in that note? Who put it there? So many questions. Getting back to it also is that, going back to that dime thing, that was pretty impressive. Obviously, that seems like some kind of drug dealing going on. And it sounded like they mentioned Canada, so it's like, are they using the same drug routes that Renault and his brothers used, you know, I guess in the previous series / you know, previous season, like, or not, you know? Because it's like, oh yeah, we can kind of get things started, because all the police are asleep at the wheel in this whole thing. Like, there's that douchebag from the Roadhouse who was very gropey and just fucking weird and disgusting. He was there, and apparently getting high off the supply or whatever, kind of getting a taste of it and just kind of being all over the place. And just the guy that he's making a deal with was like, yeah, you screw this up, I'm gonna saw open your head and I'm gonna eat your brains. He himself being a weirdo. I feel like they really stepped up like the weirdos, because certain situations throughout the show, it's like, yeah, like Dougie's situation with his wife is like, what, would you really act that way? Like, everyone in his life is like, okay, Dougie, maybe you're just kind of like on an off day, maybe you're sick or something. But it's like, no, like, people in his life are just kind of like, okay, okay, sure thing, Dougie, you're just acting weird, okay, and just accepting things. And then just everyone else is just being weird. Especially that dude, he does the dime trick. He flicks it in the air, and the other dude's looking up, and he feels it in his mouth, and he pulls it out, and the dime comes down, lands in the other dude's hand, and he looks down. The other dude looks down, and it's like, whoa. I know I keep saying the other dude. I apologize. But look down, and the dime's going. It's like, okay, was that just some cool magic trick, or is there something more to that, like drug dealing dude or not? The slightly less monstrous one, the one that was like, oh, I'm gonna cut your head open and eat your brains. That dude, is there something more to him? I mean, definitely something else with the other dude, because he ends up running over a kid. Did not see that coming. I kind of had a feeling. We had Carl in the park or whatever, sitting on a bench for whatever reason. I'm like, okay, dude's gonna come barreling down. He's gonna go through there, ends up hitting Carl or something, isn't he? Just had that thing. It's like, yeah, he's like, because he's like, oh, the dude called me a kid and he treated me like a idiot or something like that, threatening me and stuff like that. He's like, I'll show them all type of thing. Like, he's just a very prideful person and just like wants to prove himself, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's what explains why he was like that with the Roadhouse situation. Like, whatever his situation is, he feels entitled to whatever. It's like, oh yeah, you're like, take what he wants. It's like, haha, like he's some big shot or something, when actually he's nothing but kind of a disgusting piece of crap. He's just something but a worm. I don't know. But ends up running over a kid. I was like, whew, that was rough. And everyone else was around looking and saying like, that's rough. No one said it was rough, but everyone was just kind of like, oh, wow, that's also, there was the lady, isn't her name Miriam? She left the the diner and ended up seeing Home Dude's face. So that's definitely going to come back to bite him in the ass, which is good. But nevertheless, but there was also a thing where Carl looked like it showed him the life leaving the boy, like his soul going away. And obviously that's connected to the whole like Black Lodge and stuff situation. So it's like, I guess his soul was going off to either one. I mean, we've never actually gotten to see the White Lodge. We've only seen like the Black Lodge. And that's got, anytime the Black Lodge is being represented by something like happening, it's kind of a yellowish light. Like obviously when Dougie was doing, well, Cooper was doing Dougie's work and everything, and it's like the lights were pointing up all over the paper, like telling him what to do. He even goes to his boss later on. His boss is like, okay, I can't make sense of this, Dougie. And he's like, oh, you're giving me a lot to think about, Dougie. It's like, what the hell did that mean, those drawings? Like, what did you see? Like, obviously it's like, oh, a lot of it's the insurance company stuff, because he called the dude a liar, and it's like, oh, here's some work, get it done. So it's like, oh, you're giving me a lot to think about, Dougie. Keep this on the hush hush. We'll keep this between you and me. It's like, what did that, like, those drawings show you? What does that mean? Dougie, also got to see a different side of Dougie's wife this episode. The fact of the matter is, she's, like, getting on Cooper because of the whole, like, situation. Like, oh, here, Dougie, here's a picture of you and this lady. It's like, oh, there's Jade. And she's like, oh, Jade? It's like, she gave Dougie a ride twice or something like that. And she's like, oh, I bet she did. It's like, wow. And then when she confronts the dude that Dougie owes money to, because basically he took out on loan and then he lost the money, and it's like, oh, plus interest, so he owes us like $52,000 at this point. She's like, you guys are idiots. This world is evil. There's so much evil in it. You guys should take a look at yourself. One of these said actors, I can't remember his name. It should be clear as day in my head, but I think Jeremy Davis, right? I think so. I think I'm sitting here thinking. It's most recent thing he's been in. He was Malcolm in season 4 of Sleepy Hollow, like the main antagonist. But he was one of the dudes, and she's like, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself. Yes, my husband should have never taken out the money, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, take this. You want to take this $25,000, and I will never see your faces again. And they're just like, wow, that's a tough name. It's like, ooh, yeah, ooh, don't, like, they just got scolded by her. That was very interesting. So also, since I brought up the diner earlier, we ended up, isn't her name Hilda? I forgot. Because I constantly refer to her as kind of like, in my head, she's like, oh, she's the German, because that's what Bobby would do. I was like, aren't Germans supposed to be on time or something like that? And she has that type of laugh. I know I'm not doing it justice, but I was like, isn't that her? And immediately the signature laugh. It's like, she popped up like, what, 3 times in the entirety of like the original show. Just kind of a little plug-in, I guess, like that. Just like, hey, we're getting like a lot of the cast back together. So it's like, hey, so. Plus, we also got introduced to, I would assume he's a hitman, which I guess, like, I was like, why are you're not a very good hitman, are you? Because it's like, for one, you use a weapon, like, it looks like an ice pick, but like super big. I mean, maybe it's not super big, but I mean, it looks like a pretty freaking big ice pick, but maybe it's not an ice pick. Nevertheless, he's got 2 targets. One's this lady, and another one is Dougie. And it's like, okay. So I was like, oh, are you an assassin? Seems like you might be. When he shows up, because at least we know, at least when he was going after the lady, he killed at least 3 people. The lady included. We heard some screaming before he went to the lady, and then he killed like another lady who was like a witness. Which is like, well, I'm like, you're not a very good hitman, because then the whole point of being a hitman is like, oh, make the assassination look clean and professional. It's like, nah, there was blood splattered everywhere, stabbing and wiggling it around. And side note, when it was done, he came around a corner and he looked at his weapon. He was like, oh no. I was like, oh, it broke my heart. I was actually a little sad, because I was like, oh, he's so sad that his weapon got broken. It's like, oh man, this is my favorite weapon. It's like, oh, it's gone now. I mean, maybe it's not even just his favorite weapon. Maybe it's like his signature weapon, his only weapon. So what that's about, who hired him, I don't know. Like I said, it's still confusing what everything's about. Obviously, like, I feel like we're setting up the drug angle again in Twin Peaks and stuff like that, but it seems like they're like not understanding what, like, I still believe that everything that's happening to Dougie, the Cooper, I keep doing that just because he's so indebted to being Dougie now. Obviously, little remnants, because he's touching that cop's badge, and it's like, oh yeah, he's obsessed with my badge and everything. It's slowly coming there, especially because Mike, which I constantly refer to him as Mike, because I was like, because that kept popping in my head too. It's like, well, we know him as a Gerard. Was it Gerard? Like, that's the guy, the human guy in the world that Mike was inhabiting. But the fact is that Mike's there now. We never really found out what happened to Gerard. I would assume that what happened was, because last time we saw him, he was in pretty bad condition, and they were going to give him his meds. So maybe Mike's no longer there. Maybe that's why Mike's popping up in like the Black Lodge. It's because like that's where he is now. Maybe he quote unquote went back home, but he's telling Cooper to wake up. So this is like some kind of. It's not like a. It's like basically part of his subconscious has been locked away from the trip. I mean, part of this whole trap situation, kind of implanting him in someone else's life, I guess, to make him kind of like. Because I guess as long as Cooper is lost, it makes it easier for him to be killed. But obviously, things have been working out, which is like the Black Lodge seems like it's working with him and everything, which is like, I mean, granted, you know, the Giant, as we know, was part of the Black Lodge and everything. It seems like it's so interesting because it seems like the Black Lodge is such a bad place, yet it's helping Cooper, which is like I'm trying to understand because everything within the Black Lodge should be evil because that's kind of where all evil incarnated is from. That's where Bob is from. That's where Mike is from. And granted, Mike stopped killing and everything, but Bob, you know, kept on and currently keeps on, you know, considering the whole him and Doppelganger Cooper situation. So I don't know. Series still continues to like befuddle me. Like, I feel like I said, I brought it up earlier, you know, before, like in previous recordings, like, I feel like the first series made more sense. But then again, it's like, well, maybe that's because I recently rewatched it knowing what I knew. So maybe that's why things made more sense. I mean, but even then, I feel like, even in comparison, I feel like this show is a lot weirder. For one, it's slower, which, I mean, you know, that it is what it is. But still, it's like, they're definitely taking their time, but it's like I still can't see where everything is connected. Like, cause like it feels like some stuff is just, oh yeah, random stuff you threw in. It's like, yeah, you wanted to bring this character back, so you just gave them their own little storyline. Whether it means anything or not, I don't know. Like I said, still trying to figure out the big picture here. I mean, we have fractions of it, but we still don't know how it all fits together. Like, what will happen now that if Diane does return? Like, how will she know that, like, I mean, her and Cooper have worked together so long and everything, but it's like, that's the question too. Like, what did Doppelganger Cooper do in that 25 years, like between like season 2 of the show and obviously this series as well as, you know, the 3rd season? I don't know. I'm always conflicted on how I want to refer to this show. Do I want to refer to it as The Return, which technically it is, but at the same time it is like season 3 because other places will label it as season 3. But nevertheless, you know, like, what did he do that kind of led to him being where he is? Like, obviously, like, because I get the feeling Diane knows why Albert's coming to get her, but it's like, will she be willing to help? Like, did something happen between her and Doppelganger Coop to make her not want to be beside him anymore? It's like, what happened about, like, did Cooper cut his ties with the FBI, or did he just disappear after everything that happened in Twin Peaks? Did he just go, and gone? Which we know Bobby learned that before his dad died, you know, the whole, like, Cooper came to visit him and things, so it's like, but then Cooper came to town, I was like, no one noticed that Cooper came to town, so I'm very interested. I want to know where everyone's story is. It seems like slowly but surely we're kind of getting introduced to everyone else's stories, kind of finding out where they are. Like, I mean, to my knowledge, I think this is a limited run series, so I think this will be the end. It's like, it's kind of like similarly like with the whole Samurai Jack situation, they wanted to give it a proper ending, so it's like we're setting everyone's story up so that we can just like finish everything off in one big swoop, while also introducing new parts to this ongoing story where you have to close up their stories too with these new people's stories, but I guess only these new people's stories are just part of someone else's story. I don't know. That's all, legitimately, that's all I know. I'm very interested to see how the rest of this play out. That's all I can really say, so. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.